There is a name that spans 4,000 years of human history, not forgotten, not lost to time, a name that refused to disappear. It was whispered for millennia. Mothers warned their children about her. Fathers hung protective charms to keep her away. Priests tried to bury her story, but she refused to vanish. Her name is Lilith, and this is a story that deserves to be told in full. Before Eve bit the apple, before the serpent tempted mankind, according to some ancient legends, there was another woman in the Garden of Eden. She was created equal to Adam, from the same dust, at the same moment, but she committed a sin so unforgivable that religious authorities spent centuries trying to erase her from existence. Her crime? She refused to submit. Today we're going to uncover everything. The ancient texts, the hidden artifacts, the forbidden scrolls, the secret message that might be hidden in the Sistine Chapel. But first I need to be clear about something important. Lilith is not one story. She is a mosaic of different traditions, Mesopotamian, Jewish, mystical, that intertwined over millennia. She wasn't erased from the Bible because she was never part of it to begin with. She is a figure of folklore who lives on the margins of sacred texts. Today we'll reconstruct this mosaic piece by piece, distinguishing historical facts from legends, ancient sources from modern interpretations. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Lilith became so important and why her story matters more today than ever before. But first, let's go back to where it all began. Open any Bible. Turn to the very first page. Genesis chapter 1. This is where the story of humanity begins. God creates the heavens and the earth, light and darkness, land and sea, animals and plants, and then human beings. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." Did you catch that? Male and female, created together. At the same time, both in God's image, no mention of ribs, no one sleeping. Two human beings created equal. Now flip to Genesis chapter 2 and read carefully. Verse 7. "Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground." Adam is alone. He names the animals, he tends the garden, but he has no companion. So God puts Adam into a deep sleep, takes one of his ribs, and creates Eve. Wait. What? First we're told man and woman were created together, equally at the same time. Then we're told Adam was created first, alone, and woman was made from his rib as a helper. These aren't just different details. These are two completely different stories. What do modern scholars think of this difference? The most accepted academic explanation is that Genesis combines two different editorial traditions, called by scholars P for priestly and J for Yahwist, written in different eras and then merged together. It's not a contradiction in the sense of an error. It's the result of how the biblical text formed over time, layering different traditions. But ancient Jewish scholars noticed this difference over 1,000 years ago. And they asked a fascinating question. What if both stories were true? What if there were two women? The first woman, created equal to Adam in Genesis 1, and Eve, created from Adam's rib in Genesis 2, who came later. If that were true, then who was the first woman, and what happened to her? Her name, according to these scholars, was Lilith, and her story is one of the most controversial secrets in religious history. Now, it's important to understand, this interpretation is not history. It's Midrash, the Jewish tradition of creatively expanding biblical texts to fill narrative gaps. The rabbis loved this kind of literary exercise. It was a way of exploring sacred texts, not documenting historical facts. But here's the interesting thing. Lilith didn't just appear in medieval Jewish texts. Her story goes back much, much further, 4,000 years further, to a civilization that existed before Abraham, before Moses, before the Bible was even written. And that's where our story really begins. Rewind time. 3000 BCE. 3,000 years before Christ. 1,000 years before Moses. We're in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, the cradle of civilization. This is where writing was invented, where the first cities rose, where the oldest stories in human history were told. The Sumerians who lived here believed the world was filled with spirits, some good, most not so good. And among the most feared spirits were a class of demons called the Lilith. The Lilith were female spirits of the wind and storm. They came at night. They were beautiful but deadly. And they had one terrifying specialty. They preyed on pregnant women and newborn babies. Imagine being a mother in ancient Mesopotamia. Every night you would lie awake, wondering if a Lilith would slip through your window and steal your child. These weren't just scary stories. People genuinely believed their lives depended on protection from these demons. The first written mention of a Lilith figure appears in one of humanity's oldest stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This epic poem was written on clay tablets around 2100 BCE. That's over 4,000 years ago. In a section called Gilgamesh and the Hulupu tree, we find a strange passage. The goddess Inanna plants a sacred tree, hoping to build a throne from it. But creatures infest the tree. A serpent made its nest at the roots. The Anzu bird raised its young in the branches, and in the trunk. The dark-made Lilith built her home. The hero Gilgamesh comes to help. He slays the serpent. The Anzu bird flies away with its young, and Lilith? She smashed her home and fled to the wild, uninhabited places. Already, 4,000 years ago, we see the pattern emerging. Lilith flees. Lilith is cast out. Lilith escapes to the wilderness. And here's something fascinating. Lilith wasn't alone. Figures similar to her existed in almost every ancient culture. In Mesopotamia itself, there was Ardat Lili, literally the maid of Lilith, a female demon who seduced men in their sleep and drove them to ruin. In ancient Greece, there was Lamia. According to myth, she had been a beautiful queen, a lover of Zeus. But Hera, jealous, killed all her children. Driven mad by grief, Lamia transformed into a monster who devoured other people's children. In ancient Rome there were the Strix, nocturnal creatures with the body of a bird and the face of a woman. They flew into houses at night, drank the blood of newborns, and left only small, drained corpses. The pattern is always the same. A female figure, beautiful but deadly, who comes at night, who preys on children and seduces men. Why did such different and distant cultures all share the same fear? Perhaps because they all shared the same terror. The inexplicable death of newborns, illnesses that struck without warning, disturbing dreams that visited men in their sleep. In a world without modern medicine, without scientific explanations, they needed a name for these horrors. That name, in Mesopotamia, was Lilith. Now here's where it gets really interesting. In 1936, the British Museum acquired an extraordinary artifact, a terracotta relief about 3,800 years old, showing a beautiful woman with wings and bird feet. She wears a horned crown, a symbol of divinity. She stands on the backs of two lions, and she's flanked by owls, creatures of the night. The museum named it the Queen of the Night. Many scholars believe this is the oldest known image of Lilith. But I have to be honest, This identification is only one of the theories. Other scholars believe the relief represents Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, or Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld. There is no academic consensus on who is truly depicted. But look at her, beautiful but terrifying, divine but dangerous, a goddess or a demon. This ambiguity, this duality, would follow Lilith for the next 4 millennia. Now here's the crucial connection. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian Empire conquered Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed. The Jewish people were forced into exile in Babylon. For 50 years they lived among the Babylonians. They learned their language, they heard their stories, and they learned about Lilith. When the Jewish exiles eventually returned to Jerusalem, they brought something back with them: Babylonian myths, including the demon Lilith. But over time, this Mesopotamian night demon would transform into something far more powerful. Not just any demon, Adam's first wife. But first, let's see what the Bible actually says about Lilith. And the answer might surprise you. Lilith appears in the Hebrew Bible exactly 1 time. Just once. In Isaiah 34:14, in a prophecy about the destruction of Edom, we read, "The wild beasts shall meet with the hyenas, and the satyr shall cry to his fellow. There also Lilith shall rest and find her place of repose." That's it. A single mention in a list of desert creatures. No story, no context, no explanation of who she is. Yet this brief mention is important. It proves that by the 6th to 5th century BCE, Lilith had entered Hebrew vocabulary, not yet as Adam's wife, but as a spirit of desolation. And the text that tells the complete story of Lilith as Adam's first wife is one of the strangest, most controversial documents in Jewish literature. Sometime between the 8th and 10th century CE, a strange text began circulating in Jewish communities. It was called the Alphabet of Ben Sira, and it was controversial, satirical, sometimes vulgar, definitely not your typical religious text. Scholars today debate its exact nature. Was it religious parody, social satire, popular folklore put into writing, a collection of stories meant to entertain? Probably a bit of all of this together. We don't know for certain. But buried within its pages was the most complete origin story of Lilith ever written, and it changed everything. According to the Alphabet of Ben Sira, in the beginning, God created Adam from the dust of the earth. And at the same moment, from the same dust, God created a woman. Her name was Lilith, not from Adam's rib, not as a helper, not as an afterthought. Created equal, created at the same time, created from the same earth. God placed them both in the Garden of Eden. They were meant to be companions, partners, equals. But almost immediately, problems arose. Adam and Lilith began to fight. About what? The text is surprisingly explicit. It came down to intimacy. When they were together, Adam demanded that Lilith lie beneath him. He believed, as the first man, as the one God made in his image, that he should be dominant. And Lilith's response was revolutionary. She refused. Her exact words, according to the text, "We are equal to each other, for both of us were created from the earth. I will not lie beneath you." Think about what this means. In a text written over 1,000 years ago, we have a woman demanding equality, refusing to be subordinate, rejecting a role she didn't choose. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. It was the first rebellion for equality in human history, at least according to this legend. Adam tried to force Lilith to comply. And that's when Lilith did something unprecedented. She spoke the ineffable name of God. In Jewish tradition, the true name of God, the Tetragrammaton, is so sacred, so powerful, that it was forbidden to pronounce. Only the high priest, once a year, in the Holy of Holies, could speak it aloud. Lilith knew it, and she used it. When she spoke the divine name, Lilith rose into the air and flew away from the Garden of Eden. Not cast out, not expelled. She left on her own terms. She chose exile over submission. She chose freedom over paradise. God was not pleased. He sent 3 angels to bring Lilith back, Senoi, Sansonoi, and Semangaloth. They found her by the Red Sea. Now, the Red Sea was not just any place in Jewish cosmology. It was considered a boundary between worlds, a place where the waters had parted for Moses, where the natural met the supernatural. And there, in that borderland, Lilith had built her new kingdom. She lived among demons. She mated with them, and she had not been idle. According to the text, she was giving birth to over 100 demon children every day. 100 a day. Why exactly 100? The number isn't random. In Jewish tradition, 100 is a number of completeness and totality. 100 blessings a day were required of every observant Jew. Lilith was creating a dark parody of that holiness. 100 demons a day instead of 100 prayers. The angels confronted her. "Lilith," they said, "return to Adam, return to the garden, take your place." Imagine the scene. 3 angels of heaven, shining with divine light, facing a lone woman on the shores of the Red Sea. Any other creature would have bowed, would have begged for forgiveness, would have returned crawling, but not Lilith. "I was created to cause sickness to infants," she told them. "If it is a boy, I have dominion over him for 8 days, if a girl, for 20 days. These numbers have meaning too. 8 days is the time until circumcision, when the male child enters the covenant with God. 20 days was considered the period of greatest vulnerability for female newborns. Lilith was claiming power at precisely the moment of maximum fragility. The angels threatened her with the ultimate punishment. "If you don't return," they said, 100 of your demon children will die every single day. 100 children, every day, forever. It was a cruel symmetry. 100 births, 100 deaths. Infinite creation, followed by infinite destruction. Even this threat didn't break her. But Lilith was cunning. She knew she couldn't win a direct confrontation with God's angels. So she made a bargain. She swore a solemn oath. She would not harm any child protected by an amulet bearing the names of the 3 angels, Senoi, Sansonoi, and Semangaloth. It was a brilliant loophole. She wasn't surrendering, but offering a way out. Those who knew the names, who had the right protection, would be safe. The angels accepted. This is how protective amulets against Lilith were born. Parents would hang them in nurseries for centuries, but the story doesn't end there. According to some versions of the legend, Lilith eventually tried to return to the garden. But when she arrived, she found Adam had a new wife, Eve, created from his rib, compliant, submissive. Filled with jealousy and rage, Lilith transformed herself into a serpent and slithered into the Garden of Eden one final time. You know what happens next. If this version is true, then Lilith didn't just leave Eden, she returned to destroy it. The serpent that tempted Eve, the creature that caused the fall of man, the reason humanity was cast out of paradise, was Adam's scorned first wife. Of course, this is legend, not biblical text. It's midrash, creative expansion of the narrative. But it's a powerful legend that would have very real consequences for centuries to come. For centuries after these stories spread, Lilith was not just a myth. She was a genuine source of terror. Families believed she would come for their children. Men believed she would seduce them in their sleep. Communities developed elaborate rituals to keep her away. In the early 20th century, archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery. Buried beneath the floors of ancient houses in Iraq and Iran, they found thousands of ceramic bowls, dating from the 4th to the 7th century CE. Each bowl was inscribed with spiral text in Aramaic, Hebrew, or other ancient languages, and many of them mentioned one name over and over: Lilith. These were magic bowls, demon traps. Families would bury them upside down beneath their homes, creating a supernatural barrier to capture and imprison demons. One inscription reads, "The evil Lilith, who causes the hearts of men to go astray and appears in the dream of the night and in the vision of the day, who burns and casts down with nightmare, attacks and kills children, boys and girls." Almost every home that's been excavated had these protective bowls. The fear of Lilith was universal. For families who couldn't afford magic bowls, there were amulets, small metal or paper charms inscribed with the names of the three angels, Senoi, Sansanoi, and Semangelof. Often, they also included an image of Lilith herself, shown bound in chains, powerless. These amulets would be hung in nurseries, placed under pillows, worn around the neck. Jewish communities used them for centuries. Some still do today. But protection against Lilith wasn't just about children. There was another moment of particular vulnerability: the wedding night. In many medieval and Eastern European Jewish communities, elaborate rituals developed to protect newlyweds. Circles of charcoal would be traced around the bridal bed, a magical barrier that Lilith could not cross. The names of the three angels would be written on all four walls of the chamber. In some communities, the bride was never left alone on the first night, always accompanied by other women who kept watch over her. Why so much fear specifically on the wedding night? Because, according to legend, Lilith was jealous of every new bride, every woman who took the place that should have been hers in a man's bed. And her revenge could be terrible: infertility, miscarriages, death in childbirth. There were even specific amulets for marriage, different from those for newborns, with particular formulas to protect the bride's fertility. These rituals seem like superstitions today, but for the people who practiced them, they were a matter of life and death. Now here's something most people don't know. In the 1940s and 50s, one of the most important archaeological discoveries in history was made near the Dead Sea. Ancient scrolls hidden in caves for 2,000 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And guess who appears in them? Lilith. In a text called the Songs of the Sage, an ancient exorcism hymn, we find the first clear Hebrew mention of Lilith as a demon. The text reads, "And I, the sage, sound the majesty of his beauty, to terrify and confound all the spirits of destroying angels and the bastard spirits, the demons, Lilith, and those that strike suddenly." This proves that Jewish communities were actively trying to protect themselves from Lilith over 2,000 years ago. She wasn't just a story, she was a threat that required divine intervention to combat. But there's another crucial source that often gets overlooked: the Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud, compiled between the 3rd and 6th century CE, is one of the most important works of Jewish literature. It contains rabbinic discussions on law, ethics, philosophy, history, and folklore. And Lilith appears in it several times. In Tractate Shabbat 151b, we find a disturbing warning. It is not permitted for a man to sleep alone in a house, for whoever sleeps alone in a house will be seized by Lilith. Seized, not visited, not tempted, seized. The language is physical, violent. Lilith wasn't an abstraction. She was a real presence who could take you in your sleep. In Tractate Eruvin 100b, we find another curious mention. The rabbis discuss appropriate physical appearance, and one of them comments, "Whoever wears long hair resembles Lilith." It's a seemingly insignificant detail, but it reveals much. Lilith had a recognizable appearance in popular imagination: long hair, perhaps wild, perhaps loose, the opposite of the respectable woman who kept hers covered or tied up. In Tractate Niddah 24b, the rabbis discuss monstrous births, and they mention creatures born that resemble Lilith with wings. This confirms that the image of Lilith as a winged creature, as we see in the Queen of the Night, was widespread in the rabbinic world as well. But perhaps the most disturbing passage concerns unions with Lilith. Some Talmudic texts allude to the fact that demons, including Lilith, could mate with humans, and the children of these unions were hybrid creatures, half human, half demonic, invisible to the world, but present, bound to their human fathers for life. This belief would have extraordinary consequences in later traditions. The Talmud represents a crucial bridge. It takes the Mesopotamian Lilith, the wind demon, and transforms her into something more personal, more intimate, more threatening. No longer just a desert creature, but a danger that could enter your home, your bed, your dreams. Some of the most colorful legends involve the prophet Elijah encountering Lilith. In these stories, Elijah meets Lilith on a road. She's on her way to a house where a woman is giving birth. Elijah demands to know her intentions. Lilith reveals her plan: to give her the sleep of death, to take her son and drink his blood, to suck the marrow of his bones, and to eat his flesh. Elijah threatens her with divine power. Lilith, cornered, reveals her secret names and promises never to harm anyone who knows them. These names were then inscribed on amulets, giving ordinary people power over the demon queen. Knowledge of Lilith was, quite literally, protection against her. In the 13th century, in medieval Spain, a new form of Jewish mysticism emerged. It was called Kabbalah, and Kabbalah would transform Lilith from a demon into something far more cosmic. The foundational text of Kabbalah is called the Zohar, meaning splendor or radiance. Written in 13th century Spain, the Zohar contains mystical commentaries on the Torah and explores the hidden nature of God and creation. And Lilith appears in it 48 times. 48 times. In the Zohar, Lilith isn't just a demon, she's a cosmic force. According to the Zohar, Lilith became the consort of Samael, the demon king, the angel of death, sometimes identified with Satan himself. Together, they form the dark mirror of Adam and Eve. If Adam and Eve represent the light side of creation, obedience, order, life, then Samael and Lilith represent the shadow, rebellion, chaos, death. One of the most fascinating Kabbalistic ideas is that Lilith and Adam were originally created as one being, literally attached back to back. God separated them, creating two distinct individuals. Adam accepted his role. Lilith did not. In this version, Lilith's rebellion isn't against Adam, it's against the very structure of creation itself. In Kabbalistic tradition, Lilith rules over an army of demons called the Lilin, her children. She commands succubi and incubi. She haunts men's dreams. She steals the seed of sleeping men to create more demonic offspring. Some texts say that whenever a man has a nocturnal emission, Lilith has visited him. The demon children born from these encounters were said to be invisible but present, haunting their human fathers throughout their lives. This belief led to extraordinary customs. In some Jewish communities, sons would not accompany their father's body to the cemetery. Why? Because their demonic half-siblings, the children of Lilith, would be there too, and it would be shameful to be seen alongside them. What makes the Kabbalistic Lilith so fascinating is her duality. She is beautiful beyond measure, and she is terrifying beyond comprehension. She is seductive, and she is deadly. She represents everything that patriarchal society feared: female sexuality, independence and power, unleashed and uncontrolled. And this brings us to one of the most intriguing discoveries about Lilith. She may be hiding in plain sight. In one of the most famous artworks in human history, the Vatican, Rome, the Sistine Chapel. Between 1508 and 1512, Michelangelo painted one of the greatest masterpieces in human history on this ceiling. Millions visit every year. Billions have seen reproductions. But almost no one notices the secret hidden in plain sight. Look at the scene called The Fall of Man and Expulsion from Paradise. On one side, Adam and Eve in the garden. On the other, their expulsion. In the center, the tree of knowledge. And wrapped around that tree, the serpent. Now look carefully at that serpent. It doesn't look like any snake you've ever seen. It has a woman's body. The lower half is serpentine, coiled around the tree. But the upper half? That's a woman. With a woman's face, a woman's arms, a woman's torso. Who is she? Here's what most people don't know. From 1490 to 1492, young Michelangelo lived in the gardens of Lorenzo de' Medici in Florence. There, he met some of the greatest thinkers of the Renaissance, including a scholar named Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. Pico was called the first Christian Kabbalist. While other humanists studied Greek and Latin texts, Pico studied ancient Hebrew mysticism, including texts about Lilith. The Zohar explicitly states that Lilith took the form of a serpent and returned to Eden to cause the fall of man. Michelangelo, who was familiar with Kabbalistic ideas through Pico, may have painted exactly that. But, and this is important, I need to be cautious here. This is a fascinating theory, not a proven fact. We have no direct evidence that Michelangelo intended to represent Lilith. Serpents with human heads or bodies were a relatively common motif in medieval and Renaissance art, not necessarily linked to Lilith. They might simply represent the personification of temptation. However, the possibility is fascinating. Look at the faces. The serpent woman has the same bone structure as Adam, the same profile, the same blonde hair. According to Kabbalistic tradition, Lilith and Adam were originally twins, two halves of the same being. Michelangelo may have encoded this belief into his painting. For over 500 years, millions of people have looked at the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Popes, cardinals, pilgrims, tourists. And if the theory is correct, almost none of them realized they were looking at Lilith, Adam's first wife, the woman on the margins of the Bible, hidden in the most famous church in the world. But what if I told you this story isn't over? That Lilith might be more present in your everyday life than you ever imagined. Before we get to the modern era, there's a crucial chapter that often gets forgotten. Lilith didn't remain confined to Jewish folklore. She entered great Western literature. And the first major author to bring her to the European public was none other than Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. In his masterpiece, Faust, published in 1808, there's a surprising scene. Faust attends a witch's sabbath, Walpurgis night, accompanied by the demon Mephistopheles. Among the crowd of spirits and creatures, Faust notices a beautiful woman. "Who is that?" he asks, and Mephistopheles replies, "That is Lilith." "Who?" "Adam's first wife. Beware of her beautiful hair, the one adornment she prides herself on. When she catches a young man with it, she doesn't let him go so easily." It's a brief moment, but significant. Goethe was introducing Lilith to millions of European readers who had never heard her name. And note the detail about the hair, the same element mentioned in the Talmud centuries earlier. The tradition had been transmitted intact. Almost a century later, in 1895, Scottish writer George MacDonald published a novel titled simply Lilith. It's a strange, dreamlike, mystical work. The protagonist travels to a parallel dimension where he encounters Lilith as a tragic and terrifying figure, trapped between worlds. MacDonald was a friend of Lewis Carroll and profoundly influenced another writer, C.S. Lewis. And Lewis, in his Chronicles of Narnia, left a clue that many readers miss. The White Witch, Jadis, the villain who holds Narnia under eternal winter, has a specific origin. In the book The Magician's Nephew, it is revealed that she descends from the giants on her father's side, and from the lineage of Lilith on her mother's side. Lilith, Adam's first wife. Lewis, as a scholar of medieval literature and mythology, knew the legend well, and he deliberately chose to connect his most famous villain to the woman who had refused to submit in Eden. The implicit message was clear. The original female rebellion was perpetuated through generations, bringing only destruction and eternal winter. It's one interpretation, of course, but one that shows how Lilith was still being used as a cautionary tale in the 20th century. But everything was about to change. For centuries, Lilith remained in the shadows, a demon to be feared, a cautionary tale. Then came the 19th century. In 1868, the pre-Raphaelite painter Dante Gabriel Rossetti created a stunning painting called Lady Lilith. It shows a beautiful woman with flowing auburn hair, gazing into a mirror, combing her locks. She's mesmerizing, seductive, powerful. Rossetti wrote a poem to accompany the painting. Of Adam's first wife, Lilith, it is told / ere the snakes, her sweet tongue could deceive / and her enchanted hair was the first gold. For the first time in centuries, Lilith was being presented not as a monster, but as an object of fascination. But the real transformation came in the 1960s and 70s. The feminist movement was looking for symbols, heroes, role models who defied patriarchal expectations, and they found Lilith. Think about it. Lilith's crime was demanding equality. She refused to be subordinate to a man. She chose exile over submission. She was demonized for wanting what men have always had, freedom. In 1976, a Jewish feminist magazine was founded. Its name? Lilith. The tagline, independent, Jewish, and frankly feminist. The demon had become an icon. In 1997, musician Sarah McLachlan founded a music festival celebrating female artists. Its name? Lilith Fair. It became one of the most successful touring festivals of the 1990s. Today, Lilith is everywhere in popular culture. In the TV series Supernatural, Lilith is the first demon ever created, the one who will free Lucifer from his cage. In True Blood, Lilith is the first vampire, the mother of all vampires, worshipped as a god by an ancient cult. In The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Lilith is a major character, Adam's first wife, the first witch, who eventually rules hell itself. She appears in Marvel Comics as the mother of demons, in the video game Diablo as a powerful villain, in Frasier as Frasier's ex-wife. Okay, that one's a little different. The point is, Lilith has gone from a name whispered in fear to a name spoken with fascination, admiration, and even empowerment. The first woman on the margins of history has returned. So who was Lilith really? Was she a Mesopotamian storm demon, a night spirit who preyed on children? Was she Adam's rebellious first wife, created equal but cast out for demanding her rights? Was she the serpent in the garden, returning to destroy the paradise she was denied? Was she a cosmic force of darkness, the Shadow Queen ruling alongside the King of Demons? Was she the long-haired seductress in Goethe's Faust, the ancestor of the White Witch of Narnia, or was she something else entirely? Here's what I think. Lilith is a mirror. She reflects back whatever each age fears most and whatever it secretly admires. To ancient Mesopotamians, she was the inexplicable tragedy of infant death. To medieval Jews, she was the danger of uncontrolled female sexuality. To 19th century artists, she was forbidden beauty and dark seduction. To some today, she is the spirit of rebellion and equality. Each generation rewrites Lilith. Each culture makes her their own. But one thing never changes. Lilith refuses to be forgotten. They tried to reduce her to a scary story. They tried to use her as a warning. This is what happens to women who don't submit. And yet, 4,000 years later, more people know her name than ever before. Because Lilith's story isn't just ancient history, it's the story of every person who was told to be quiet and refused. Every person who was told to accept their place and walked away instead. Everyone who chose difficult freedom over comfortable oppression. They called her a demon because she demanded to be treated as an equal. They relegated her to the margins of scripture because she wouldn't be erased from memory. And in the end, Lilith won, because here we are, thousands of years later, still telling her story, still saying her name, still remembering the first woman who said no. The woman on the margins became immortal. If this video blew your mind, you need to subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss what's coming next. We explore the hidden stories, the forgotten traditions, the figures on the margins of sacred texts. And trust me, we're just getting started. Now I want to hear from you. Was Lilith a demon or a revolutionary? Do you think her story deserves to be told more often? And would you have left the Garden of Eden? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If you want to dive deeper, check out the videos on screen right now. I've got more hidden Bible stories that will completely change how you see history. Until next time, stay curious, question everything, and remember, the best stories are often the ones on the margins.